They think things are harder than they are. And one example I love is they say, our industry's complicated or our product's technical or something like that. So if somebody says that, the first two questions I ask them are, what is mitochondria and what is photosynthesis? We think things are complicated that really aren't. That's one of the other things that I'm really on a mission to help folks solve.
I honestly think the best salespeople can simplify. Like it just resonates very easy and it's easy to digest.
There's so much more noise, especially when you think about the top of the funnel. There's so much noise, and there's noise from all different angles. So I think the ability to stand out is harder, way harder. Than demos only exist to solve skepticism. And once you solve the skepticism, you can make a decision, and it comes down to pricing and packaging and things like that.
Welcome to Prospecting Pros. Today on our show, we have Corey Bray. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Great to see you.
So on this show, we talk about everything sales development, appointment setting, which you have a bunch of experience in. So I'm excited to dig into that a little bit. We were just talking before I hit the record button that you had actually a few books. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of background on you and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I was working in an industrial distribution company in 2008. And the company's sales weren't where they needed to be. Basically, you had a bunch of folks that they called them salespeople. They were basically customer service reps, and they would sell to people that they know. They would sell to people who came inbound, and that's what they did. And we said, look, there's a big market out there. There's a lot of opportunity to go out and find other accounts, other people in existing accounts, and sell more. So let's run an experiment. So I ran an experiment, hired 3 people, and they did a phenomenal job. They sold so much because they were turning over rocks that had not been turned over for a long time or were perceived to be too difficult to actually prospect into. So once we started doing that, I said, oh, this is fun. So long story short, I guess it's 2025 now. So I've been doing sales for a long time.
When was this? When did you say?
That was 2008.
2008. So tell us about like in between. How did things transpire? So you had a little early success. How did things transpire from there? And some of the different roles you had to get to where you could actually publish a book.
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that I did was I'd left that job after 5 years or so and started working with other companies on a consulting basis. And what I realized was that it was kind of the early stages of the analytics boom where everybody's working on spreadsheets or paper. I did this with 2 different firms sequentially, and it was pretty fun, where you've got basically a managed service provider that's doing some kind of tech work. You've got a business intelligence software company, and then you've got a customer. And you need to bring them all together because just the business intelligence software isn't going to set itself up overnight, or at least back then it wouldn't. And so you need that implementation partner. Selling that was eye-opening because you had to get in and understand people's data and mash it up together from different sources, from CRM, from ERP, from marketing automation, all those different types of things, and then start to glean insights and really understand what are the questions that employees need answers, that managers need answered, that senior executives need answers, and that the board cares about. And how do you go from 3 simple questions to an answer via data? Did that for a long time. And that was really awesome because I got to work with so many different industries and types of companies. And eventually I said, well, let's move to San Francisco and actually work at the software business because that seemed to be the highest growth opportunity out of them all. And come into another company. At that point, it was basically the 3rd time in my career where I come into a situation where they didn't have a great onboarding program. There wasn't a clear definition of the target market. We didn't know the personas inside and out. We had some hypotheses. We had some product. We had a lot of code written and some early successes with a product, but how do you build a sales team that can consistently perform? And how do you build an environment where you can consistently bring people into it, promote them up through it, expand products and all of those types of things? What I realized was it's not that hard. It's 30 to 100 things, depending on what the business is, that people need to know, that people need to do. And then there needs to be supportive mindsets around the horn from the reps to management all the way up and down the chain. And so that's kind of how we got to today, was that I think that there is a massive opportunity for sales organizations to move up the performance ladder in a way that's truly not that hard. And I can dig more into that.
I think what you described is the vast majority of companies. They just don't have the processes in place. They're focusing for various reasons, right or wrong. They're focusing on the product. They just never had anyone in place to actually build out these processes. Maybe it's a product-led founder or whatnot. And with us, we work with a bunch of different companies, and they kind of open up the gates a little bit so we can see what's going on. And we're like, it's pretty obvious. Most companies do not have this built out. So yeah, a lot of opportunity there.
And they're mystified. They think things are harder than they are. And one example I love is they say, our industry's complicated or our product's technical or something like that. So If somebody says that, the first two questions I ask them are, what is mitochondria and what is photosynthesis? And those two things have a couple things in common. One is almost everybody knows what they are, or they're at least familiar with the terms. And secondly, they're incredibly more complicated than anything you'll find inside of a sales organization. So we've demonstrated the ability to A, learn, and B, retain that knowledge from 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we don't make any money off of it. It doesn't make us any money at all. So the question then becomes, why did we spend so much effort to master a 1,000-page book as 1/4 of our 17-year-old life? And at this point, we think things are complicated that really aren't. That's one of the other things that I'm really on a mission to help folks solve.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. People will overcomplicate, go into like the very specific details, whether that be features, super technical, and it's just like simplify it. It's not that difficult. Like in our sense, we're not actually doing the selling. We get those same questions all the time. Oh, how are your reps going to be able to understand a super niche product like ours? And it's like, well, same way you hire a new SDR, the same way they would. You should have a little bit of some marketing materials, maybe a demo recording. Like it's not that complicated. And you always have to say, we've worked with more complicated products than yours in a nice way. I do agree, like it tends to be overcomplicated. And that I honestly think the best salespeople can simplify. Like it just resonates very easy and it's easy to digest. So if you're explaining to your neighbor what you do, you can actually easily tell them. You don't have to overcomplicate it and go on for 5 minutes. You can just say in a sentence or two, hey, this is what we do. This is what we sell.
Super easy.
But
Someone asks me what I sell. They say, what do you sell? I say sales training software. Everyone knows what that means. They don't know what features it has. They don't know how much it costs, but at least they know what game I'm playing.
I think one of the biggest telltale signs you can see if things are simple within an organization is, for us, like when we onboard, we'll ask them to, in their own words, tell us what they do. And just that simple response to that question will tell you how much clarity they have on what they're selling. Sometimes you get that perfect answer. It's 1 to 2 sentences max. And other times it's like a 10-minute response. So understood. You kind of talked about, then you went back to your story. You went to San Francisco. How did you then from there, progress in which ultimately led you to Closed Loop? Tell us about that gap. And then also like when you wrote the book, and then, tell us about when you felt you had enough knowledge and people wanted to hear what you had to say.
I'd been working with coaches for a long time at that point, because I think that's somebody smart a long time ago said, if you're going to be good at something, you need to have a coach. And you look around and most executives have coaches and all athletes have coaches except for maybe Bubba Watson. So I hired a coach and have been working with one for a long time. And then in San Francisco, I started working with another coach, sales coach, management coach. And just in those discussions, that's where I came to the realization. I was like, why is it that freaking hard for a company to say, this is who we sell to? And these are the people inside the companies that we sell to. And here's the 3 customer stories that resonate. Let's tie those back to people. And let's go into a meeting understanding what we're going to use and what resistance we're going to run into and what discovery questions we're going to use, and make it more systematic as opposed to this just magical thing that is unknown, because it's very known. There's a small number of variables that happen in any selling conversation. And you know what the variables are, you know what the outcomes are, but you don't know which way it's going to go, but that's fine. You still have an idea of how to play the game. And so we said, all right, well, how do we take this thing and make it actually repeatable across businesses? So we spun out and started working on our own thing in 2015. And after a couple of years of that, one of the things that we really honed in on was this idea of sales enablement. Sales enablement was this thing where it was kind of a war of words, where all these different technology vendors were trying to define it so they could have their edge. At the same time, you had a bunch of consultants that were doing the same thing. And then you had people inside of companies that were being hired to do sales enablement, but they weren't given the authority to do what they needed to do, the access to the people. And so they ended up as glorified party planners or ambulance drivers that would just go to whatever emergency it was. And a lot of them ended up being in roles where they onboarded BDRs and did product training, because those are things that are pretty low-hanging fruit. You can stick somebody over in that corner. What we realized was that a lot of the big opportunities were to get more out of the mid-level and senior folks, to get more out of managers, and to build systems inside of businesses that would launch products and absorb companies through M&A activity and things like that, beyond just the basic 101 fundamentals. So that's kind of where we started driving to, and did, 500 or so services engagements. And at some point
since 2015.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It might be 700 now. That was the number I used to use. I think it's probably 7. I haven't counted recently. So, yeah, 700 or so. Now all of a sudden you get to see It's kind of like the story of the business intelligence implementations. You get to see all different sizes of companies and shapes of companies and industries and problems and maturity levels. And once you get into enough different situations like you do with your business, you realize it's kind of all the same. It's like 85% the same all the time. And then you just tweak the other 15% and it's tailored, customized, and works.
You probably have a ton of data. I imagine things have changed over time, right? What's working in 2015? Like I remember I used to work at an agency before I started Level Up in email. Like every 100 emails we sent, we got an interested lead. It was great. Like that's just not the way it works anymore. So like I imagine things have changed drastically over time. What are some things that stand out to you that have changed, since you started to now in the sales landscapes?
Oh my gosh, there's so much more noise, especially when you think about the top of the funnel. There's so much noise, and there's noise from all different angles. There's noise from, there are more products that do anything. You moved from a world where, if you look back at as recent as 10 years ago, there was this idea that there was a winner take all in any given market. There's a market and somebody's going to win that market, and that's going to be the winner. And there might be 2 or 3 other companies that can compete at a high level. Well, what we see now is that that's in most markets, maybe outside of like SpaceX, that's not really the case, because the entry costs to start a business are lower. The ability to scale the business and reach more people it's more approachable than anywhere. So now you've got something that looks more like restaurants and gas stations, where you can have lots of people have successful businesses in a given space. And with that, you have different lots of noise. You got lots of companies, lots of products, lots of prospects that are or lots of people prospecting to try to the attention of various buyers. And at the same time, people that buy stuff have large tech stacks, lots of consultants they work with, lots of employees. And so there's just so many more moving parts. So I think the ability to stand out is harder, way harder.
That was actually going to be my next question is, so I agree with you. There can be multiple people in a space that succeed, but there's more and more companies out there. But with that said, there's a lot of companies out there that think they have something unique, but they don't. And so it's challenging, I guess, for them to face that, or they discover that over time. Is that easy to spot when you go into a company to be like, okay, well, they are a software development company just like the other 300 out there. There's really nothing that differentiates them.
Exactly. So one of the exercises that we do with our customers is around this idea of the winning zone. Winning zone being defined as where you uniquely positioned to win against your competition. So one way to really get this to surface is we do an exercise called the pain finder. We say, what are all the different features of either your product or your services offering, whatever it is? What are the things that you do? So imagine that as column A. Then for each one of those things in column B, we say, what are the benefits of those things? And I know somebody's jumping on their chair like, we shouldn't talk about benefits. Chill out, y'all. We're getting there. So then we go from the benefits and we say, what pain would someone have to be experiencing today to care about that benefit? Now we've got pain points that we solve that link back to the features or the things that we do of our product or service offering. Let's take those pain points that we solve and let's say, which personas do those impact? Are those executive level pain points that we solve, or are those folks down on the ground floor? Which market segments do we solve those in? All of them? Or our government market segment, our enterprise market segment, our small business market segment? What market segments do we solve them in? 2 more things. If we solve those pain points, what impact does that have on the business? No impact? Massive impact. And then finally, how well are we positioned to win if we can solve that pain point? And so what I've found several times, I actually had a company, this was a while ago, I'm not going to say who it is. Somebody blew up their entire sales team after we did this exercise. It wasn't because of me, but it was part of this confluence of things that happened. And they realized that they weren't uniquely positioned to win as a result of solving any of their pain points. And if you're a 4-person team that's bootstrapped and you're just trying to be profitable and slow, that's fine. But if you took 200 million in venture capital and you have to grow 100% a year, you're toast. And I think that's one of the things that folks need to look themselves in the face around is objectively, how do we win by being able to solve this acute pain point for somebody? And it can be something that the product or service offering does. It can be your pricing and packaging. It can be your customer service level, which is also a feature of what you do. It can be a lot of different things. And so there's ways to spin it, but looking yourself in the mirror and being truthful about this is where we win, this is where we battle, and this is where we lose. I think from a marketing perspective, market segment perspective is key.
So what I'm hearing and understanding there is you're essentially simplifying, giving them clarity on and building out a playbook on where they stand in the market and where they should be positioning themselves and what should they be talking about and what shouldn't they be talking about.
Yeah. And it just goes back to know what game you're playing. Like we are playing this game and we expect to win X% of deals in this market segment. Form a hypothesis, scientific method, form a hypothesis, test it. It either proves itself or it doesn't. and then iterate.
I have two questions. First, answer the first question. What are the typical stage of a company that you're helping out with? I know it can probably vary, but what is typical for them?
Well, we've worked with companies of all sizes, and I'd say I spend probably half my time with companies that have 0, 1, or 2 salespeople that are trying to figure out how to scale, because there's all these things that they know they should be doing, but they're not doing them because they don't have the bandwidth to do them, or they don't have the expertise to do them. And so the question, that you use the word sales playbook, like, when do you need your first sales playbook? I would argue before you hire your first salesperson, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Just magically transpose your knowledge from your brain to theirs via API? That's not going to happen.
This episode is sponsored by Level Up Leads, a B2B sales development and appointment setting agency. Companies always need pipeline, but they oftentimes don't want to hire SDRs internally. The whole process is risky and expensive. You've got hiring costs, onboarding, training, additional spend on your tech stack, a few months to ramp up. And with that being said, SDRs are a high turnover position, and the person you hire might not necessarily work out, so you need to start all over again. That's why companies outsource this. Level Up Leads allocates a team of people, their tech stack, so you can onboard and launch your campaigns in about a week. They set qualified meetings in your calendar so your team has more selling opportunities. Visit levelupleads.io today to learn more. All right, now back to the show.
Well, what happens is, this is actually quite common, is someone will hire the salesperson thinking the salesperson will figure it out on their own. Like they need, unless you're hiring a senior person, like, oh, I'll hire an SDR who's junior and never done this before or has 1 year under their belt and they'll figure it out. It's like, no, they won't. I see this happen all the time.
And I would argue that you cannot hire a single person that will figure it out, just based on my experience going into companies and watching the arguments that happen at the executive level. You take somebody that leads, you take 4 different department heads, put them in a room and get them to come out with a clean, specific target market matrix of, here are the attributes of our target market, and here's what ideal looks like, here's what good looks like, and here's what we don't want to talk to them or rejected looks like. You're going to have debates. You're going to have furious debates around certain things. Hiring an individual contributor to come in and do all of that, when I literally have never seen an executive team be all on the same page coming out of a meeting. And that's just the market that we go after. And we haven't even talked about the 8 or 10 other things that you've got to agree on. So yeah, that's not going to work.
That's a common question I get, is someone will come to me like, hey, I'm thinking of hiring an SDR. And I want to build out something for them. And my first question is, have you done it already yourself? And then typically it's no. They're like expecting just to hire someone, pay them very little, and hope that it'll work. It's just like, no, like, you should do it yourself, even if you're not good at it, but you get some type of baseline and process in place. It doesn't have to be perfect, but otherwise, honestly, I think you're going to be wasting your money if you're hoping that they're going to come in and do it all and you haven't done it yourself.
Totally. And on the other side of that, they're probably going to spend a bunch of time trying to build stuff. If you think about sales enablement broadly, you've got the build and you've got the execute. And the people that build like building. So as soon as they're done building thing A, they're going to want to go build thing B. They're not going to want to go make 100 cold calls. So the person that's good at building is not the person that you want to execute. And the person that executes, are they going to just duct tape and WD-40 something together that is serviceable for a week for them? And then you try to roll it out to 3 other people that you hire. So so that's like the lower end of the market. And then, we worked with companies, or I think the company we did the most engagements with was Bill.com, as they scaled over the last 6 years from, I don't know, like 50 reps to, they've got hundreds now. And they all use triangle selling throughout the company. The bigger companies are fun. I think the companies that are scaling fast are fun. I like working with companies where the CEO, CRO, COO is very engaged, because if the head person doesn't know who I am, then we're obviously not doing things in the world that they want to. And a couple other, Fortune 500 companies we work with, they truly don't even care who we are. They're like, we need a keynote speaker. You guys check the boxes for keynote speakers. So they put Hillman on a plane and put him on stage, and he crushes for an hour and a half, and everybody loved it. And they move on to the next thing. So if you want Hillman for keynote speaker, cool. But that's not our target market.
I asked you previously, what's the typical company stage or company size you work with? It sounds like it varies. Now, with the different companies that you work with, how often is it that they know their ICP? You can come in and you like, they have it down, or is it something where you actually need to help them in the process of understanding who their ICP is?
The later stage companies that have realized that they don't know their ICP because they've beaten it up long enough. I'd say that if somebody has fewer than, I would say as a rule, if someone has fewer than 10 salespeople, they probably don't actually know their ICP. And people are probably listeners, be like, Corey doesn't know his ICP. Okay, I'll give you the real clear. Here's the ICP. ICP for what we're doing right now is a B2B company has 0 or 1 sales enablement people that sells a product that costs between 5,000 and 100,000 a year and speaks English. Like that's my ICP right now. Question was, who else have I worked with in the past? So now all the 𝐿The folks are satisfied in the audience.
I asked because I know you're working with a lot of different companies, and so do we. And it's very common. Someone's looking for outbound help. They want sales. They have high targets, and you have them fill out a form on who their ICP is, and you're like, this is ridiculous. It's like every C-level position, and it's like it's not an ICP. You actually need to now say, okay, look, these first few months, we're going to help you find your ICP. We can't just do this right now, but like you clearly don't know who it is. We can't target every single title. Like all of a sudden it becomes this discovery phase. It's not an appointment setting phase.
Well, okay, so this is fun. You dug onto something very interesting. So I would say 0 people I've ever met can fill out a form to tell me their ICP. They have either already developed something through an iterative process where them as a management team got together without a facilitator and they have something strong and documented and says, this is who we target, or they haven't done that. And if you ask them to fill out a form, they're going to give you something that is incomplete at best. And I think one of the challenges with ICP is that it's not as multidimensional as it should be in many cases. And I used the words earlier, ideal, good, and rejected as 3 different categories, because you need your salespeople to be able to differentiate between, is this an ideal value of this attribute, or is it just a good value of this attribute? So companies, employee count, for example, maybe 100 to 1,000 is ideal, but you'll work with somebody who has 10 to 100. You'll also work with somebody who has 1,000 to 2,500. So giving folks a multi-dimension, and the fear is that this overcomplicates things. And it's just that Einstein quote, make things as simple as possible, but not simpler. And I think it applies to a lot of different places across the sales org, including, how do we score a call, for example? You can't just say it's good or bad, because if somebody does something different than the examples of good or bad, they're going to think it's good. Mm-hmm. So give them some goalposts and help calibrate, I think is a great word. Calibrate the ICP, calibrate what we're doing in the conversation. And that helps tie it back to another topic, which we don't need to go into, is coaching, because you can't coach somebody on something they haven't been trained on. You can't coach somebody on something you haven't agreed on. So if you're coaching them on how they're targeting their market or how they're conducting a call, but you haven't set up front kind of how you do it and agreed on all of those types of things, you're going to get in a tough spot.
Talk to me about doing some outreach with some of the companies or coaching them. Are there particular channels you're recommending right now, or some that you're seeing convert better than others?
I think the number one area, and I know we'll also talk about others, like, who have people at your company actually talked to before? They know that you exist. And so it might be people you met at a trade show. It might be people that used to work at a customer and went somewhere else. It might be folks that have engaged with your white paper or something like that. And those aren't traditionally looked at high quality leads. Like, oh, I'm quoting other people, those are the garbage leads for marketing. They know who you are. They know that you exist. And I always joke that my rule number 1 of sales is you can't sell something to somebody that doesn't know that you exist. And it sounds kind of wild, but it's incredibly true. So I think that who you've actually engaged with is a big honeypot. But the problem is you haven't engaged with that many people, and marketing budgets are tight. And how are you actually going to get on the radar for that? And so the bigger opportunity, which is much broader, is narrowing in who exactly is your target market, your ICP from a company perspective. Who are the personas inside of those companies that you want to target? What specific pain points do you solve for each one of those individuals? And then getting in touch with them, and outbound is the most efficient way to do that. And then no magic bullets, omni-channel, call them. Email's tough, obviously. Be creative, send them stuff. Have a physical address if they go there. So, I think the omni-channel outbound type of thing, but really the fundamentally important point is, who are you actually trying to reach, and what's the message to that person that's going to resonate?
If they know.
Yeah, if they know. And if you don't know, like, what are you doing?
Honestly, so many companies are just trying to figure it out.
My question to that, John, is why in the heck did you build a product, or why did you decide to offer a service if they haven't figured it out yet? And that's a real head scratcher for me.
Yeah, it seems to be most companies fall into that bucket, or they know some of it. They have some idea of who they need to be reaching out to, but they don't have it clearly defined. What would you say to a company that has gotten a lot of referrals in network, maybe some conferences and whatnot, but they really haven't done any outbound, or they're really not that out on the internet? They're not easy to find on the internet. What would you say to that person in terms of take those next steps in terms of getting themselves out there and some demand generation?
Well, the best messaging exists within the people that you've already worked with. And so I think step one is go farm as much information as you can. Why did you buy from us? Why did you select us over brand X or company ABC? How are you using us? What impact has it had on your business? And you can do that whole traditional challenge solution impact case study model, but it doesn't have to be a formal, legally approved case study. That is the substance that you will use for outbound. So if you have successful customers that you've generated from whatever source, like start there now. And it's Monday when we're recording this. By Friday, you'll have plenty to be able to shape your outbound, which obviously then is, build the list. What are the companies that we want to target? What are the titles within those companies? Who are those actual people? How do we get in touch with them? You got to get their phone numbers. You got to get their email addresses. And it's a heck of a lot of work. So you should probably just frankly call John and have his firm help you out with it.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people are hesitant to do that. Oh, I don't want to bother my client. It's like, just be upfront with them. Hey, look, we're trying to grow. Obviously, we don't have everything figured out, but you bought from us, and it would really mean a lot if you just took 15 minutes and you answered a few questions. Most people are going to say yes to that, especially if you're a client. Like, just be honest. Don't just, hey, look, I'm looking for some feedback. We're not perfect, and I'm trying to, figure out the next steps. Most people will take the time to do that.
Exactly. And if they won't do that, that's a very strong signal to you that you probably have a product problem you need to fix before you start doing outbound.
Yeah, or they're going to stop working with you pretty soon.
If your customers won't talk to you, you have a problem. I don't know much, but I know that.
All right, I got another question for you. So SDRs are a big topic. If you go on LinkedIn, they're just, at least in my feed, there's the AI SDRs. Is it dying? Go-to-market engineer? Like, what's your take on the whole thing over the next few years? Do you think SDRs are still going to be around, or how do you think that role is changing?
I think outbound SDRs will always be around because outbound SDRs it's basically an arbitrage on the market. Each incremental marketing lead costs more money. And at some point, the amount of money that a outbound SDR lead costs is less than that incremental price for that marketing lead. So this is basic economics. So I think that's always going to exist. From an inbound perspective, I think that people that know what they want and they're coming in through a form or whatever, they can talk to an AI person. They'd probably be happy to. They get instant response and routed to where they need to go. And from the company's perspective, that's cool. You can take that cash that you would be spending on an inbound person to play traffic cop and put it in outbound. So I think that's going to work. And I think from a outbound AI perspective, people are going to go nuts if they're getting robots calling their phones every day.
Luckily, it's still legal and to just do cold outbound with a call. But there's still the whole LinkedIn, could be other social channels, but also email. And it's just going to become more and more crowded. So the crappy thing right now is some people are taking times doing their research, sending out a custom personalized email, but it's not getting looked at. That's the tough part.
There's other things you can do, and I'll throw one of them out there. If you're a software company, one of the things that software companies have struggled with tremendously is having a good, clean demo instance. And it's kind of wild. It's not that hard. It's kind of complicated because you have different database tables to talk to each other. So it's not like you can go into one place and just say, I'm programmatically fixing the demo instance. It's a little complicated, but AI can do that. And so that's one of the opportunities is instead of, hey, would you be interested in a 30-minute conversation with us? Okay, that's not good. Or, hey, we're working with other CFOs who are struggling with this and concerned about this. If any of that resonates, are you open to chat? Okay, better, sure. Or, hey, I put together this custom thing for people just like you who are struggling with these 8 things. Here's 30 seconds on it tailored to you. That's real interesting.
It's better. Yeah.
So it's
like in a video.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so I think there's opportunities to go in that direction that leverage the technology in different ways that aren't just people talking. Like why it's funny because if you think of AI SDR and you just say, okay, it's going to be a person, but a robot, and it's still going to talk. Is that solving the problem? Or is the problem, because in sales, like the only reason salespeople exist is because there's information asymmetry between the person that makes a product and the person that buys the product. The person that makes the product thinks it solves all the world's problems. The person that buys the product thinks it's a scam or a limit or something like that. And you need a salesperson to help bridge that gap. Roughly speaking, otherwise you wouldn't need to talk to somebody. If somebody does sales operations and they like Salesforce and they get a new job, they're not going to be like, oh, let me call up 8 vendors and go through a whole evaluation process. Be like, no, this thing works and it's changed since I worked at the last place. Let's go with it. But if they hear of something new that comes to the market, there's that information asymmetry. And so they need to go in and do a demo, and demos only exist to solve skepticism. And once you solve the skepticism, you can make a decision, and it comes down to pricing and packaging and things like that. If you invest the AI energy solving that thing, these topics that I've just run through incredibly fast which is buyers are skeptical about what sellers are offering, and create less asymmetry between the SDR who's doing the prospecting and the person that's receiving that message, and helping them realize, oh, wait a second, maybe this is worth a look. That's a great way to test it, not just trying to replicate our voice.
I'm skeptical on the whole AI SDR thing. I definitely think it's better on the inbound. Yeah, it might get better and better, and then I'll be proven wrong. But I was testing out one for an inbound for another company I recently started, and the guy said, "Yeah, they're not that good." My friend who was helping me with it, but here's the best one I have. And I did a test call. They called me. It was like, yeah, I answered the questions, and I tried interrupting it. And it was like, doing a good job of answering my interruptions. But if I didn't say anything, it didn't say anything back.
Oh, wow.
So then it was just like pause, and I was like, all right, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah.
So it has to get better. Again, this is on inbound. Someone that had filled out or clicked on an ad. Cold outbound still, I just don't think it's there.
No, I don't think it's there. Yeah, inbound, because stuff like that, you can train the inbound, it'll get better, but people are going to hate getting interrupted by robots. At least a person they have empathy for, and they know that they can ask it follow-up questions and maybe find something. So yeah, I don't think outbound's going away at all, because it's becoming easy to grow, and you can spend more money on marketing, or you can do outbound prospecting. Those are, there's other options, but there's like the two big buckets of where you can invest. So why would you just ignore one of them?
We've historically done a lot of outbound, and we're putting more and more effort into marketing and inbound because they just tend to, the sales cycle is much shorter. But man, it's harder to get that exact ICP. With outbound, you may not have the timing, but you can target the exact companies that are going to be a good fit. So there's some pros and cons. I think companies should be doing both.
And it's also, I think you mentioned the LinkedIn thing. It's to be said that I have yet to see somebody say something positive about AI SDR that wasn't the owner of an AI SDR company. I know, right? Please, if anybody's listening, send me the example. I've never heard anybody say, I'm a customer of this AI SDR company, and they've crushed it for us. I saw some dude that owns an AI SDR company bragging about how he booked like 5 meetings in a day. I'm like, bro, you've got GPUs working for you, and you booked 5 meetings. I know somebody named Kevin that did that before lunch yesterday.
Yeah. All right, Corey, I'm going to thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Where can people find you on the internet?
On the internet, you cannot find me in person because I'm in hiding. On the internet, you can find me at Corey Bray, CORYBRAY. I have fun Google, and I'm on LinkedIn. So say hello.
Right.
And
I'll put your LinkedIn in the comments as well.
We've written 8 books. If you want to pick one of them up, they're on Amazon.
That's impressive. Guys, go check out Corey. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Until next time.
Thanks, John.
All right. See ya.